Welcome to the Food Safety and Standard Operating Procedures Training Module, presented by the Maine Department of Education Child Nutrition Programs. This presentation will cover food safety and sanitation and standard operating procedures. It is required that all schools must employ a certified food protection manager. This must be in place within 60 days of a new school opening or when the previous food protection manager has left. ServSafe meets this criteria and is good for 5 years. Why is food safety important in schools? First, there are 4 populations that are considered high risk. These are young children, pregnant women, older adults, or people with a weakened immune system. Young children are served every day in schools, but you could potentially be serving all of these populations on any given day. The number one risk of not maintaining proper food safety standards is foodborne illness. A foodborne illness is a disease that is carried or transmitted to people through contaminated food. This becomes an outbreak when 2 or more people experience the same symptoms after eating the same food. It would then be confirmed in a laboratory. So how do you handle a potential outbreak? If you think you might have an outbreak, you need to contact the Maine DOE Child Nutrition Office, your local health inspector, communicate with your school nurse, and have your ghost trays or samples ready. Some common practices related to foodborne illness include time and temperature abuse, poor cleaning and sanitizing, poor personal hygiene and cross-contamination. Other risk factors include purchasing from unsafe sources, improper storage, for example, storing ready-to-eat food products below raw meat, and lack of training. The 3 different types of hazards are biological, chemical, and physical. Biological hazards include an employee that comes to work sick, possibly putting others at risk. Chemical hazards include improper storage of cleaning supplies and chemicals that are used to clean food prep surfaces being left out while food is being prepped. Physical hazards can be anything from an improperly secured and covered bandage, or even a piece of jewelry falling into the food. Food safety is important in every step of the process. The flow of food includes purchasing, receiving, storing, preparation, cooking, holding, cooling, reheating, and serving. Now let's go through each step one by one to make sure we are taking every step we can to ensure safe food is being served in your schools. The first step in the flow of food is purchasing. You need to make sure that you are using only reputable suppliers. If Joe down the road is offering to give you the best deal on potatoes, it is your responsibility to make sure that his farming practices are safe, inspected, and approved. The next step is receiving. You need to make sure that your suppliers know that you need to check the delivery before they leave. Check the temperatures of potentially hazardous foods. Do not be afraid to refuse foods that are not in good quality. You have a responsibility to serve your students safe food. You also want to make sure that your suppliers know that you will not accept substandard food. You will also want to make sure that deliveries are put away as quickly as possible to prevent time and temperature abuse. The next step in the flow of food is storage. Let's start with dry storage. There are many things to be mindful of in your storage areas. Always keep your chemicals separate from your food and paper goods. Items must be stored away from the walls and at least 6 inches off the floor. Single-use items should be stored in original packaging and covered. Always be mindful of FIFO. This stands for first in, first out. As a general rule of thumb, this always applies, but still continue to check expiration dates and ensure that items that are in the front are the ones that are dated to expire first. Be sure to discard any food that is past its expiration date. It is also good practice to date items as they are received from your supplier. This way you can check to make sure you are not bringing in items that are close to the expiration date. Now let's talk about TCS foods. These are foods that require time and temperature control for safety. The list of TCS foods includes the following: milk and dairy products, shell eggs, except those treated to eliminate salmonella, meat, including beef, pork, and lamb, poultry, fish, shellfish, and crustaceans. The list of TCS foods also includes the following: baked potatoes, heat-treated plant food such as cooked rice, beans, and vegetables, tofu or other soy protein, synthetic ingredients such as textured soy protein in meat alternatives, sprouts and sprout seeds, sliced melons, cut tomatoes, and cut leafy greens, and then any untreated garlic and oil mixtures. Once an item has been removed from its original packaging, it is required that it is labeled. This label should contain the name of the product, the date it was prepared, and the date that it needs to be discarded. TCS foods must be marked if held for longer than 24 hours, and a discard date must be written down. TCS foods that are kept below 41 degrees can be kept for up to 7 days. The count begins from the date that the food was prepared or removed from its original packaging. When organizing your coolers for storage, it is important to keep certain foods in certain places. From top shelf to bottom, this is the way meat products should be stored. Ready to eat on the top, followed by seafood, whole cuts of beef and pork, ground meat or ground fish, and then whole or ground poultry. When we talk about cooking temperatures later on, you will notice that the higher the required internal temperature, the lower on the shelf that it goes. Next up in the flow of food is preparation. Preparation begins with the safe food handler. As a food service employee, you risk contaminating food if you have a foodborne illness, you have wounds that contain a pathogen, you sneeze or cough on the food, have contact with a person that is ill, do not follow proper hand washing procedures, or if you have diarrhea, vomiting, or jaundice. With some illnesses, a person may infect others before showing any symptoms. For example, a person could spread hepatitis A for weeks before having any symptoms. With other illnesses, a person may infect others for days or even months after symptoms are gone. Norovirus can be spread for days after symptoms have ended. Work attire is very important for the safe food handler. It is required by Maine Food Code that hair restraints and beard restraints, if applicable, are worn in the kitchen. Your clothing should be clean, and aprons should be clean and changed if they become soiled. Aprons should never be worn outside of the food service area. This includes while taking out the garbage or using the bathroom. Per Maine Food Code, the only jewelry allowed from the wrist down is a plain wedding band. Fingernail polish or artificial nails should not be worn in the kitchen. If you or your employer chooses to allow these, then gloves must be worn at all times. Remember, you are still required to follow proper sanitation and hand washing procedures. Every kitchen must have a dedicated hand wash station. These areas must include hot running water, a hand washing sign, single-use paper towels or an air dryer, and a waste receptacle. Never use hand sanitizers in place of hand washing. Hand washing is required to be done by everyone. It must be done before prepping food, when changing tasks, before putting on gloves, after using the restroom, after coughing or sneezing, after smoking, eating, or drinking, after touching any part of the body other than clean hands and forearms. Maine Food Code states that ready-to-eat foods cannot be handled by bare hands. Single-use gloves must be used when handling ready-to-eat foods. This does not apply when washing produce or handling foods that can be considered ready to eat but are being cooked within another dish. Gloves are never a substitute for hand washing. They must never be washed and they must fit correctly. Gloves that are too big may not stay on or could be cut while prepping food, causing a physical contaminant. Gloves that are too small may tear or rip easily. Single-use gloves can help keep food safe by creating a barrier between hands and food. Hands must be washed before putting on gloves and when changing to a new pair. Remember, some food handlers and customers may be sensitive to latex. Consider providing gloves that are made from other materials. Cross-contamination is a common risk in kitchens and can easily be prevented. Using separate equipment like knives and cutting boards for raw food and separate ones for ready-to-eat food is one way of preventing this. Color-coded cutting boards can help make this easier. Clean and sanitize your workstation before and after tasks. You cannot assume that this was done properly every time. Prep raw foods and ready-to-eat foods at different times. And when cost-effective, you can also buy food products that have already been prepped. Just be sure that you don't sacrifice the quality of your food when doing so. So, temperature danger zone. The temperature danger zone is something that every food handler needs to be familiar with. The temperature danger zone is the range between 41 degrees and 135 degrees Fahrenheit. Bacteria can multiply rapidly within this range, making foods unsafe to eat. Food has been subject to time and temperature abuse when it has been stored at improper temperatures, it was not cooked to the correct internal temperature, it was held at the wrong temperature, it was thawed, cooled, or reheated incorrectly. If food is held within this range for 4 hours or more, it must be discarded. You are required to maintain temperature logs for your refrigerators, freezers, dishwashers, and your food temps. Your equipment will have built-in thermometers, but it is always good practice to have a backup thermometer inside of them. You are required to check your thermometer's calibration once a week and record that this is being completed. A bimetallic stem thermometer can check temperatures from 0 to 220 degrees. When using a bimetallic stem thermometer, the calibration nut is used to adjust the thermometer to make sure it is accurate. If you are using a digital thermometer, you cannot adjust calibration, but you still must check it to make sure it is accurate. Knowing how to check the calibration of your thermometer is very important. There are two ways to do this. First, there is the boiling water method. For this method, you will bring a pot of water to a boil, insert the thermometer, and the thermometer should read 212 degrees. If it does not, you would use the hex nut to adjust. The next method, and more common method, is the ice water method. This method is safer than the boiling water method as there is no risk of burns. You first fill a cup with ice and then with cold water. You'll then insert your thermometer into the ice water and let it sit. Once the dial has stopped moving, it should read 32 degrees. Once again, if it is off, you would use the hex nut to adjust. Minimal internal cooking temperatures. This is another piece of information that is important for the safe food handler to either know or have easy access to this while in the kitchen. Remember when we talked about food storage earlier? The required internal cooking temperatures directly relate to how food should be stored in your coolers. When cooking any other foods like fruits or vegetables or grains, just be sure to bring them to 135 degrees or above so that they are out of the temperature danger zone. Now let's talk about transporting foods. This may not apply to everyone, but if your school satellites meals, it is important to be sure you are doing this safely. Always use an insulated food grade container. Clean your transport containers. Check the internal temperatures of your food before departure and at arrival. And all food being transported needs to be labeled with a use by date and reheating and service instructions. Now we're at the next step where we'll be holding food for service. When holding food, be sure that the food is protected. If it is being held in a cooler or warming box, be sure to cover the food. If it is out on a salad bar or a service line, you need to make sure that you have sneeze guards in place. Hot foods must be held at 135 degrees or higher, and cold foods must be held at 41 degrees or below. If you are using a non-refrigerated salad bar, you must use ice packs or ice to help maintain proper temperatures. Be sure to monitor and log your food temperatures during service. After cooking or service, you may have to cool your foods. Ensuring that foods are cooled properly is important to maintaining safe food. When cooling foods, they travel through the temperature danger zone, so you must get them through this zone as quickly as possible. Divide large quantities of food into separate shallow pans. This will help speed up that process. Using ice baths with frequent stirring or even ice paddles inserted into the food can also help this process. Now let's talk about thawing food. There are a few different ways that food can be safely thawed. This can happen as part of the cooking process, in the microwave, submerged under running potable water that is at 70 degrees or lower, or the safest way, which would be in the refrigerator. This ensures that your food does not pass through the temperature danger zone during the thawing process. Never leave food out on the counter to thaw or use hot running water to do so. When reheating foods, they must be brought to an internal temperature of 165 degrees for 15 seconds. Food that is out for service and has entered the temperature danger zone can be reheated as long as you are sure that it has not been in the temperature danger zone for more than 2 hours. During service, it is important to be sure that all foods are being held properly. Hot foods must be held above 135 degrees, while cold foods must be held below 41 degrees. When using self-serve bars, like a salad bar, be sure that each item has its own utensil. It is also good practice to keep backup utensils readily available in case one is dropped so that it can be quickly replaced. Be sure that you have sneeze guards in place and that they are in good condition. All surfaces in the kitchen must be cleaned and rinsed. This includes walls, storage shelves, and garbage containers. However, any surface that touches food, such as knives, pots and pans, cutting boards, or prep tables, must be cleaned and sanitized. The process for proper cleaning is as follows. First, you want to scrape or remove food or debris from the surface. Next, you will want to wash the surface. Make sure to prepare your cleaning solution with an approved detergent. Wash the surface with the correct cleaning tool, such as a cloth or towel. Next, you will want to rinse the surface. Using clean water, rinse the surface, again with the correct cleaning tool. Finally, you want to sanitize the surface. Use the correct sanitizing solution, prepare the concentrate per manufacturer's requirements, and use the correct tool, again, such as a cloth or towel. You want to make sure the entire surface has come into contact with the sanitizing solution. Do not dry the surfaces off. You always want to allow sanitizer to air dry. Make sure you know the proper concentration for the sanitizing solution being used in your kitchen. It is also important that you have the proper test strips for your solution so that you can ensure that your solution is at the correct concentration. For manual dishwashing, you are required to have a 3-compartment sink. Be sure to clean and sanitize the sinks and drain boards before use. A 3-compartment sink must be set up in the order of wash, rinse, and then sanitize. Fill the first sink with detergent and water that is at least 110 degrees. Fill the second sink with clean, hot water for rinsing. And fill the third sink with water and sanitizer to the correct concentration and temperature according to the type of sanitizer being used. If using hot water for sanitizing, the water must be maintained at 171 degrees and the items must soak for at least 30 seconds. Be sure to have a clock with a second hand and a thermometer by your dishwasher so that your staff can ensure the proper procedure is being followed. For machine dishwashing, whether it be a high-temp sanitizing machine or a chemical sanitizing machine, you are required to keep a temperature log to ensure the machine is functioning properly. For high-temp machines, the final rinse cycle must reach a minimum of 180 degrees or higher. For chemical sanitizing machines, be sure to follow the manufacturer's instructions and monitor the temperature and sanitizer. For all machine types, you will want to be sure that the machine is kept clean. Never put items through the machine with excessive debris, and be sure to scrape, rinse, or soak items if needed. Be sure not to overload the machine. We all want to get things done a little bit quicker, but this will not allow the machine to clean items properly and could make more work for you in the end. Never towel dry items, and again, be sure to always monitor temperatures and ensure proper operations. Pest control. All kitchen staff need to be aware of the risks and work together to ensure that all precautions are being taken to prevent an infestation. All schools are required to have an integrated pest management program. Make sure you inspect your space regularly. The goal is to prevent entry and access. Do not leave outside doors open. We need to eliminate access to food, water, and shelter. Keep food stored in tight containers. If leaves collect at your doors, be sure to clear them to prevent harborage. And be aware of your school's pest logs and have open communication with your pest control operator. Food defense. It is your responsibility to protect your food. Think about where your food is being stored and how it is being kept safe. Is it being protected from intentional contamination? Make sure all of your storage rooms and equipment are locked so that your food cannot be tampered with when you are not around. Now that we have gone through all of the steps of keeping your food safe, we are going to talk about the written procedures that you are required to have in place to ensure that everyone knows your food safety plan. These are called Standard Operating Procedures, or SOPs. All schools are required to have a HACCP-based food safety plan in place that are your standard operating procedures. HACCP stands for Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point. SOPs are written practice and procedures that must be adapted to suit your school's needs. SOPs should be reviewed annually and revised as needed. Sample SOPs are available online through the Institute of Child Nutrition. They have a very robust library of sample SOPs, so be sure only to download the ones that are applicable to your operations. Also be sure to read through them and customize them to reflect your true day-to-day operations. Here is a look at a sample SOP. I pulled this one specifically because this is an example of where it should be customized if you choose to follow the Maine Food Code standards. Maine Food Code states that you may wear polish or artificial nails if you are wearing intact gloves. You may leave this policy as is because you are allowed to be more restrictive than the Maine Food Code, but you cannot be less restrictive. If you choose to leave it as is, fingernail polish and artificial nails not being allowed, be sure that this is communicated clearly with your staff and that they understand this. It is good practice that you review your SOPs with your staff annually. Review of these procedures counts toward your annual required professional standards hours. New employees should be given these to learn upon being hired. Some common review observations that we see while we are in schools are jewelry, other than a plain wedding band, being worn below the wrist. This includes fitness watches and other rings. Not all food being kept at least 6 inches off the floor. We understand if your delivery has just been dropped off, but we frequently see crates of milk sitting directly on the floor, and this is not allowed. Temperatures not being documented. This especially includes the documentation of thermometer calibration. SOPs not being reviewed or customized. And health inspection reports not being posted in public view. Thank you for watching this training module, and as always, you can find us online at maine.gov/BOE.